Hello, welcome back. It's just me again because I thought I'd carry on this series that I started the other week. I mean, can you even call it a series if it's only in 2 parts? Probably not, but here we are. It's the sequel at least. I'm going to take a look at the worst thing that each modern Doctor has done, and that's any Doctor from the new series onwards. Now, to get it out of the way, John Hurt's Doctor, the War Doctor, look, who knows what happened in the Time War? He probably did some horrible things, probably some awful things, judging from the state of the War Doctor when we meet him in Day of the Doctor. So let's just go with any of those, because that way it's covered. And similarly, the Fugitive Doctor, again, not really sure what we know about her. I mean, the worst thing she ever did, to be honest, was turn up and for no apparent reason to kickstart an arc that never really went anywhere and actually ended up fracturing 60 years of... Anyway, the Ninth Doctor. This one's a little bit tricky because the Ninth Doctor has quite a limited run on telly. And not to mention the fact that because of all the trauma from the Time War, he's not really one for pushing the boat. He does what he needs to do, and it's a lot of near misses of self-sacrifice, but you can't really call that something dodgy. The only thing that I could really think of was the fact that he takes Rose back to see her dad, and this kickstarts a chain of events, you know, that it means that Rose, well, inevitably becomes quite insufferable and quite cocky, but that's neither here nor there. But it does set up the idea of changing time and going back in time and whatever, and Rose having that authority in a way, which basically ends up causing, you know, the Ninth Doctor's regeneration. It also leads to her in 10 being really cocky and arrogant all the way through. I'm not a 10 Rose fan. I'm sorry. I know it's a hot take, but I'm not. Come at me. And it's the kind of thing that eventually, you know, it leads to their separation because they try and be too much like each other, especially on Rose's part. And the idea of her changing time and being able to do it and everything, it fucks up. People die. I mean, they don't stay dead, luckily, but even the Doctor dies at one point. And the Reapers are going around, swirling around, killing everything in a very underrated episode of Doctor Who, I think. But there is no denying if they'd never gone there in the first place, none of that would have ever happened. But then you could say that about every episode of Doctor Who, really, couldn't you? So, yeah, I really struggle with the Ninth Doctor, not going to lie. I didn't struggle to pick something, not struggle with him. I think he's great. Now the 10th Doctor, a couple of contenders here. I was thinking maybe the idea of, you know, creating John Smith as a person, as a human being who basically has to off himself for the greater good of a man he doesn't know, doesn't meet, never will meet, because obviously for... you know, many complicated logistical reasons that can never happen. That's quite dark. That's quite sad. It's one of Tennant's best performances in that 2-parter in Series 3. It's phenomenal telly. That's quite rough though if you think about it from the Doctor's decision making, but I suppose desperate times call for desperate measures. Look at me. I didn't have any mitigating factors before. I'm coming at this now a bit more neutrally. Bit more neutral? I don't know what the right word is there. There's also the stuff with the Time Lord Victorious, which is, you know, very sort of much the downfall of the arrogance and the vanity of the 10th Doctor and him realising, oh, no one can stop me, and him saving a group of people actually also results in someone taking her own life to preserve the timelines and everything. It's a bit of a mess, but the one thing I want to point out is the fact that he causes Harriet Jones's downfall. That's probably the worst thing that Doctor does. Because think about it, right? It's a Doctor fresh out of his regeneration. He's finally settled into who he is and starting to get to grips with who he is. And it's a really early example of the arrogance and vanity of the 10th Doctor being able to take down her government with 6 words and, you know, the Thatcher callback, which admittedly is quite a funny joke. But because of Harriet Jones's downfall, because she just wanted to, you know, defend the Earth from a group of aliens that, although we're retreating, we're going to enslave the human race. Again, the mitigating factors, they're on both sides. But because of that, it means that Harold Saxon, aka the Master, can take control and become Prime Minister. Obviously, this in itself is quite bad, but the Master's dastardly scheme involves, you know, chopping up the future human race into little Christmas decorations that kill. I mean, it's quite horrific, really, isn't it? Nobody wants to end up like that. Certainly not me. Certainly not anybody else I know. He also imprisons and tortures Martha's family. And Captain Jack, and Martha's family never had any part in this. I mean, Martha and Jack, at least, you know, they were willing companions of the Doctor. They knew what they were letting themselves in for. But Martha's family end up on this ship for a year, tortured and, you know, enslaved, essentially. And they remember it, even when everyone else forgets. They're the ones that have to bear the brunt of that at the end of it. And it, you know, it destroys Martha's family. It means Martha has to leave the Doctor to look after them, because how can she leave them after everything they've been through? Or because the Doctor wanted to take a cheap shot at Margaret Thatcher wannabe. Again, the 11th Doctor, a very interesting couple of ideas here. I mean, you know, the murdering of Solomon the Trader, again, that's quite dark for a Doctor. It's especially, you know, in what is quite a fluffy, campy episode. It definitely does stick out, but I think if I were to pick something, it would have to be the whole Demon's Run thing, because it's the epitome of this lonely god crap that Doctor Who was doing at the time that I'm not a big fan of. I don't like the whole, oh, he's such a lonely god, he can do absolutely anything, he's completely unstoppable. So it was, you know, in that sense, it was quite nice for him to be taken down a peg, and it was good, you know, earned comeuppance. But the knock-on effects it has are horrific. You know, it's the reason why River is basically, you know, full of childhood trauma because she's been, bred to be a weapon and an assassin. It has really huge complications for Amy and Rory because they end up splitting up at one point because, Amy's infertile now. She can't give Rory children, so she gives him up and all of that. And, you can argue how well that was handled in Asylum of the Daleks. I don't think it was handled that well, I'll be honest. It has huge effects for them, and they're the Doctor's best friends, It's a huge big deal, and it's all because the Doctor just got a little bit too cocky and, couldn't spot the trap that was being sprung around him, even though in hindsight it's actually quite obvious with the flesh baby and everything, but that's neither here nor there. And a lot of people also end up dead or beheaded, or both. Or neither in Strax's case. Hooray. The 12th Doctor. Now, the worst thing the 12th Doctor has done is, again, it's one of those things, it's sort of the overconfidence and the cocky part, but I can't not mention some of the earlier 12th Doctor stuff where he's just rude for no reason. Like, to me, the Doctor would never say shut up to a lost child in the woods somewhere. Like, that doesn't scream the Doctor to me. Even the more sort of abrasive Doctors wouldn't do that, Hartnell and Colin Baker, they had their moments, but I don't think either of them would have told a child to go away or shut up or whatever he says. That sort of stuff I'm not a fan of. But the thing that stands out to me is his he gets a bit too confident with Missy a bit too quickly. And, the things that happen in that finale are harrowing for all of the TARDIS team. I mean, Bill gets turned into a Cyberman and dies. The Doctor gets shot by a Cyberman and dies. And Nardole gets left to defend people from the Cybermen and probably dies. Missy and the Master both die. There's a lot of death. It's quite grim. And it's all because, they would never have ended up on that spaceship if it wasn't just, cruising for distress signals and dropping her into scenarios to see how she does. Yes, it's a lot of coincidence, I suppose. Quite deadly coincidences, really. But yeah, it's just... And also the whole Master thing being there, the Master sort of aids the Cybermen in a way. Whether it's in the razor disguise in the first half or even little things like summoning the lift. And it just leads to what is quite a, the Doctor makes a great stand and everything, but he was never going to win in that scenario. And they would never have been there if it hadn't been for the idea of just keeping Missy behind lock and key for a little bit longer to sort of establish if she was going to be swayed or not. Not that this whole thing banks on Missy, I know, but it's more the being there kind of aspect of it. Do you know what I mean? Ooh, the 13th Doctor. Now, there's a few for this one. I mean, the way she talks to companions quite often is quite rough. And she's not the first Doctor to do it, but it stands out with the fam because they're quite wooden. And it sort of maybe rings home a bit more because she's never challenged on it. It sort of just goes, oh, is this what we're doing now? Apparently so. The whole kablam thing with the systems aren't the problem, it's how people exploit them. No, the systems are still the problem. But for me, it's got to be the scene in Spyfall Part 2 where she uncovers the Master's real identity. This is bizarre for a whole load of reasons. Number one, it's completely unnecessary within the story because she's already outed the Master as a British spy to the villains of World War II, I suppose. She's outed him as a spy, and that's enough to have him pretty horrifically dealt with anyway. But she undoes his disguise, which means that those guys can see the Master for who he physically is, which is, not white. And that's going to have some pretty risky complications for the Master. And I just don't think it's very doctory to... Yeah, I know it's the Master, and I know he's done awful things, but that's the Master. The Doctor doesn't do this kind of thing. The Doctor doesn't weaponize people's ethnicities in my head to get her out of a quick fix. And the way she's so, chill about it, she's like, oh, now they'll see the real you. What? I can't be the only one that's bothered by this, surely. Because, I don't know, it just doesn't feel very doctory to me. It just feels unnecessarily cruel and completely pointless because he's already been outed as a spy anyway. Yeah, it just feels like putting the Master through even more unnecessary torture, probably. Knowing what those guys were like, not a nice group of people. And I'm not the first person to say that either, famously. The 14th Doctor, this one is, it's the Salt, isn't it? What else is there? It's a limited run of things. With the Salt, the Toymaker and the Pantheon come back into our reality, which has knock-on consequences for the following series, and I assume series 2, probably. It means Empire of Death happens, which is... That's a crime in itself. But for him, it's his death, all right, the bi-generation happens and all of that, but it's what causes it. It's the 14th Doctor. At that point, he doesn't know he's going to bi-generate. He just thinks he's dead, and it's all because he got a bit too cocky with the superstitions at the edge of the universe. And it's a cool rule. I like sort of the idea of, invoking superstitions? I can't tell. Superstitions at the edge of the universe can sort of help break down the barriers between different dimensions and stuff. That's all really fun, that sort of sci-fi liminal space type thing. I'm all over that. That's cool. But it is quite dumb. It just is. And maybe having a code word for Donna's meta-crisis thing, that seemed kind of lazy, but that's not really the Doctor's fault. That's more the script, but hey-ho. But that's it. That's up to them on. I'm not going to do Shoot Your Gatwa yet because his era is still ongoing. Maybe we'll come back and talk about it after he's done. If you guys would like that, let me know. If you disagree with anything or have any of your own ideas, please let me know. You all had really good ideas last time for the classic Doctors, so I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this one. And yeah, let me know, because it was really fun going through all of them and seeing the things that I just had nearly made the list, or things that I just hadn't even thought about. I completely forgot that the Fourth Doctor commits genocide in the Horns and Imon. That just completely went out of my brain. So stuff like that is really helpful. And let me know if you like it. Share it around if you do. Give it a like, subscribe. This isn't usually my bit. This is Tom's bit, my co-host, but it's just me today. So that's why it feels really stilted. I will be back in a fortnight's time with something completely different, I imagine, or something completely the same. Well, not completely the same. That'd be ludicrous, wouldn't it? I've had a lot of caffeine today, in case it wasn't obvious.